stay at home and protect lives. That's the clear warning from the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, who says it's not a request, but an instruction.
Debido a la emergencia del coronavirus, alumnos y docentes han tenido
Hi folks, quick update from me on the campaign against coronavirus.
I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead.
Rallentare la diffusione del nuovo coronavirus. In
finding faster ways to test people who may have the virus.
And as nobody knows when theatres will be able to fill their seats again, it's an industry in crisis. The Book of Mormon set that's still on stage, an eerie reminder of the suddenness of the pandemic.
Hello and welcome to Chronicles, SNS Online spin-off show that continues to touch base with a wide variety of people from all walks of life to talk about how the current situation is impacting them both professionally and personally, as well as offering a cupful of cheer, some top tips, up-to-date stats, and most importantly to touch virtual base with a cheery hello, and without the need for hand sanitiser. I'm Nick Randall.
Down the dog and duck, and Darren was going on about how much he hates the EU, and Ewan asked him why. Well, Darren mentioned sovereignty, but when Ewan asked which European laws Darren was against, he couldn't think of any. The conversation moved on to holidays, and Darren mentioned that he'd never been abroad, and how he didn't want to on account of there being too many foreigners.
We finally found a new carer. Heidi from Lichtenberg. This Heidi came with glowing references from Mount View. Basically, they weren't able to prove her job couldn't be done by Brit. Which is ridiculous because I've heard they're very short-staffed at Mount View. I don't know why we couldn't find a nice English girl like that Moira. Ralph said she was actually Scottish, which makes her a foreigner now. Thanks to me, he says.
Tales from the Golden Age are a brand new series of monologues produced during lockdown and available free on YouTube. The first 2 episodes explore the changes in society since Brexit and COVID, with some wry observations, as well as a damning indictment of a future society based on intolerance and fear, a society which arguably we are heading towards as politics and pandemic combine to divide us. Well, writer and director of Tales from the Golden Age, also creator of the Golden Age Theatre Company, Ian Dixon Potter, joins me on the line now. Ian, welcome to the programme. What were your initial hopes for this series and how has lockdown ultimately influenced the final result?
Well, I don't think the monologues would have happened at all without lockdown. I got the idea from the BBC. It was about 3 months ago, at least. There was an announcement on Radio 4 that the BBC were going to remake Alan Bennett's Talking Heads.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's good. I remember enjoying the original ones. And I thought to myself, oh, maybe I can do that. Maybe I can write some monologues, not something I've ever done before. But like a lot of people involved in theatre, I was twiddling my thumbs. The lockdown put a stop to a play that was supposed to be produced this year. Another one was likely cancelled as well because of it. Everything's put on hold. But this was something I could do.
Sure.
Immediately struck me that I could film them. Even the rehearsals could take place over Zoom. So we didn't need to get together until the actual final filming. There'd just be myself, the actor, and the videographer. So we could probably practice social distancing as well. So the whole thing came about as something that could be done during lockdown, in the same way that the BBC did the same with Alan Bennett's monologues. I had no intention that they should in any way resemble Alan Bennett's. And my memory of the original ones was a little vague. In fact, I don't think I'd even seen them all at that point. Oh. And then it was well into writing my own. And probably after filming the first one that I actually got to see Alan Bennett's. I ordered the DVD, so I watched the originals, and around about the same time as they were first broadcast, about 3 or 4 weeks ago now. But by that time, I'd already written 5 or 6 of my own monologues.
Right.
So in content and style, they weren't really influenced by him at all.
Sure.
But it's interesting, of course, the very first review that came in, I compared them.
Ewan said he wondered if sovereignty was the real reason Darren voted leave. So, whichever way you look at it, we're miles apart when it comes to Brexit. And to be frank, I'd rather hang around with people who don't look down on me on account of my opinions. That's what it amounts to.
Tell us about Trivial Dispute, which is the first of the two plays that are available so far. Well, I mean, what I have here is a working class guy made good in business but little education, living in a salubrious part of town, a taste for the finer things now like classic cars, a true blue Tory and Brexiteer, and he has some choice words about immigrants too.
Yes, well, that one came about. It was a confluence of three different things came together for that. I've always been amused by the idea of something which starts out as a trivial disagreement and then escalates and becomes very serious. It's just something that amuses me and tickles my fancy. And it happens. It happens so often in real life. So that was the first ingredient. That's been on my mind for a long time as possible basis for a play. The second aspect was the division in society created by the Brexit vote. The very fact that we had a referendum, irrespective of the result, has obviously divided society, riven it in two. Family members are not talking to each other, old friends no longer see each other. That's the worst thing about Brexit. If you put aside the pros and cons of whether we should or shouldn't be leaving the European Union, the damage it's done to British society is irrevocable, and it will probably last a generation or more.
Yeah,
there's deep resentment on both sides. Unfortunately, even the winners deeply resent the fact that they think the losers, the Ramonas as they call them, look down on them, and to a certain extent that's true. And of course, the Ramonas deeply resent the fact that this country is being taken in a direction which they're not happy with, which it's turning into the sort of country they no longer feel patriotic for. They no longer want to live here in some cases.
I mean, I get the distinct impression you're letting off some steam here, Ian, possibly speaking for the whole country.
No, I mean, there are very few people on either side of the debate who would disagree with the fact that society is divided in two.
Yeah.
And then there's a third element. The third element was a real set of circumstances in the classic car world, which I know something about, where a disagreement between two middle-aged classic car enthusiasts, which started out as a trivial matter and escalated, didn't escalate quite as far as it does in the monologue, but that real event, that real series of events, was the third element which came together. So you had the three things: the notion of the trivial dispute escalating, this particular disagreement, which tied up with social media and the use of Facebook and creation of fake profiles, and then the whole background of Brexit and the division of society. And of course, not most people out there are not terribly interested in the classic car world, but you don't need to be to enjoy this monologue. But you do, I suppose, need to have an eye for what's happened to the British society as a result of the referendum.
So just to explain to people who haven't watched it, there is a classic car group that I think they create a Facebook group, and this chap who is very happy-go-lucky, he's made his millions and all the rest of it, he's part of that now, he's part of that world, but he seems to clash with this chap called Ewan, who is a sort of cosmopolitan and liberal-minded retired academic. In some ways, I do have to ask you this, Ian, is Ewan you? Because there are a number of similarities. And bear in mind, I've known you for a good 20 plus years.
Yes. Well, in some respects, of course, yes, in some respects, my wife and I moved to an area where, having lived for several decades in central London and enjoyed the cosmopolitan character of central London, we now found ourselves living in an area where we're surrounded by predominantly English people.
Sure.
And I recall back in when the referendum happened, there were only ever leave posters in people's windows. And my wife is Japanese, and we joked that she was the only Japanese in the village. And,
Very good.
And so in some ways although I have actually made a number of very firm friendships in the area, nevertheless, there is that we are slightly at odds with the character of the way we live, but we do like it here from other respects. The countryside is beautiful. It's great fun, particularly if you like motoring as I do, because you can jump in a car and drive out into the countryside. You can't do that in central London. No. So, and my wife, Hiroka, enjoys the garden. which we couldn't enjoy so much in central London.
Yeah,
so there are positive things about living here. And so the character Ewan is based slightly on some of those aspects, but not entirely. I mean, the character Ewan and his main antagonist, the character Trevor, are really loosely based on real people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But logistics of filming it, I mean, how did you sort of gather the talent together, the locations, the communication?
Well, in terms of the actors, so far I've been working with actors that have previously appeared in my plays,
right.
and of which there are now quite a long list. Mm-hmm. So there's someone to fit almost any part I can come up with. But first of all, for Trevor, there was a clear, obvious candidate for that role, and also for the second monologue, the character Dorothy, there was a clear candidate for that role as well. So there was no problem there. Rehearsal had to be through Zoom, and so they had to have those facilities that most people seem to have now. And the third element was the videographer, Howard, who was a friend of a friend. It was very difficult to do without him. In fact, before I made contact with Howard, I was thinking, well, I'm going to have to get hold of the equipment myself and train myself on how to use it. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to, because Howard has, we use 2 cameras. He has very professional equipment. His approach is very skilled and professional, and particularly at the editing stage, I've been quite amazed by what he can achieve. For example, in the second monologue, one of the scenes was in a room in a conservatory, and the rain was lashing down on the glass roof, and it made a complete mess of the sound, but he was able to clear all that up post-production.
I actually love the atmosphere with the rain falling in those scenes. I thought it added to the piece anyway.
Yes, you can see it as well through the windows behind the character.
You certainly can. I mean, in terms of the actors, did they have to learn the whole thing, or were there cue cards available for some scenes, or did you just stop and start a lot?
No, we certainly didn't use cue cards, but the first monologue, where the character Trevor, played by Neil Somerville, that was all rushed. I had a location in mind, which was perfect for the monologue. I won't say too much about it because it will spoil the monologue for anyone who's going to watch it, because the location is critical. And when at the end of the monologue, or where they realize where the location is, they'll understand that. And I had there aren't many places that would suit that, and I had somewhere in mind. And then all of a sudden, that place was going to become not available. And we had to really rush it. I think I had to do it by the 4th of August, because on the 5th it wasn't going to be available for a couple of months. And so Neil was put in a position where he had to learn the lines as quickly as possible within a few days. And
wow.
But because we were filming, we could split it up. And so he would he learnt it quite well, but then he would stop and consult a page of the text. It broke down into about 16 pages. So 16 different sections were stitched together. You wouldn't think so, would you, looking at it?
No.
But no, he had only a few days. Whereas with the second monologue, Kate had about a month to learn her lines, so she was pretty well off book. But we filmed with 2 cameras simultaneously in almost the same position, one in wide and one in close-up. So if an actor does fluff a line, then we can just cut from the close-up to the wide back again.
There's some very nice reviews coming in, it must be said. Theatre Monkey, they all gave 4 stars. Increasingly edgy as this tale unfolds. He holds out for attention the entire 40 minutes. The writing is equally consistent, and I'll agree with that. Some excellent observations are made about social media etiquette. This was a good point, and how words on a screen may not be taken with the sort of tongue-in-cheek manner that would be more discernible in spoken conversation. A startling reminder, too, that one should never take oneself too seriously, even in a global pandemic. That was London Theatre. And finally, the Reviews Hub. The monologue neatly captures the voice of a generation of people who feel disenfranchised from the global pace and who are powerfully entrenched in their own worlds. We may not like what they have to say, but as Dixon Potter creates a snowball effect within the drama, it is clear how easy the individual and the state can lose control. I think that sort of nails it, really. Are you happy with those?
Yes, they're very happy. Yes, they were thoughtful, well-written reviews, and the reviews are remarkably consistent. That's unusual in a way. 3 reviews for Trivial Dispute, all of them 4 stars. Now, that is unusual. In the past, a play has often had a whole range of stars, from 1 to 5 for the very same performance. when you get that kind of range, it probably tells you more about the reviewer than the play.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was in Marks and Spencer's when his armed SWAT team swooped in and arrested that poor Italian girl. They had her pinned to the floor. They dragged her out bleeding. I heard she had learning difficulties, poor thing. He said that was an exceptional case. He said it's virtually a daily occurrence round here. He said over 70% of the population of Stoke-on-Trent voted leave. I told him I was one of them, but I didn't expect all this. All these forms? You were supposed to be getting rid of red tape.
Let's talk about the new normal. I mean, I've got to say, this seems to be like a continuation of Russell T Davies's brilliant and rather prophetic Years and Years, a peek into a near future that seems terrifyingly feasible.
Well, I did see Russell's Years and Years, and it was very good indeed.
Yes.
But this monologue is actually based on a play that was written well before then.
Okay.
In fact, funny enough, when the play itself was performed, somebody compared it to an episode of Black Mirror.
Oh, right.
So these televisual comparisons seem to be right. The events of the play seen from the point of view of one character. So you don't see the whole play, but Dorothy is an elderly lady who suffered a stroke some years before. And she's had a succession of carers looking after her, full-time carers living in their house. But it's increasingly difficult to find carers in the post-Brexit world because, as you know, of course, the great majority of people in the care profession are often from places like Italy and Hungary and Romania and Poland. And they've all gone home.
Yes, quite.
So it's really difficult for them. And so they end up having to employ a foreigner illegally, because a foreigner isn't allowed in this future society to work in this country without a permit. And to get a permit, you have to go through lots of hoops. You have to absolutely prove that the job can't be done by a British person. There isn't a British person for the job. And it's really difficult to prove that. So in this future society, just 4 years in the future, the amount of red tape that people have to go through, all the hoops they have to go through just to employ someone, is a fundamental part of the post-Brexit Britain. So it's obviously I'm imagining a worst-case scenario in many ways. I'm imagining that our industry has collapsed because of the tariffs, because of the fact that we haven't got a trade deal, that there was a great shortage of labour, and that the balance of the payments is dramatically reduced, and so on.
The Foreign Office has confirmed that the Spanish Prime Minister is about to tear up the Anglo-Spanish Gibraltar Agreement, and that unfortunately this will pave the way for the Scottish Republic to join the European Union. The government had hoped that in return for Britain giving up its claim to Gibraltar, Spain would veto Scottish accession to the EU. Speaking in Madrid, the Foreign Secretary, Sir Nigel Farage, said that he should have known better than to trust a greasy Dago. The Spanish volte-face is seen as another example of Britain's increasing isolation.
Also, what was interesting in this particular play was the way it was broken up with radio reports being read from, Radio 4 of the World Service, which were undercutting the action of this particular woman. And it was explaining more about what society had changed, how had changed. Jacob Rees-Mogg is the Prime Minister. We have a 200-mile wall being put up, border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. So Nigel Farage is Foreign Secretary.
Well, I did say it was the worst-case scenario.
Well, absolutely. And, of course, reading these bulletins beautifully is the BBC's finest Robin Lustig. How did you manage to find him?
Well, Robin, he was the friend of an actor who appeared in Little England.
Ah, right.
So this actor, Albert Clark, who sadly is no longer with us.
Oh, God.
He passed away last summer.
Oh, right.
In fact, I only discovered that recently. It was very sad because I didn't know at the time. I sent out messages to Albert asking him if he'd be interested in appearing in a play. And, of course, I didn't hear anything of that. That's strange, because Albert's such a gentleman. He wouldn't not respond, and it turned out that he'd passed away. So it's all very sad. But, yes, it was Albert who put me in touch with Robin, and I've kept in touch with Robin ever since. I went to Robin's house near Alexandra Palace with Janet Smith, who is the sound recordist, and we recorded the bulletins for the play Little England and used them again in the monologue. So it sets a scene. It sets a scene You learn about what's going on in the country. You learn about the fact that Scotland is no longer part of the United Kingdom and is now moving towards becoming a separate country within the European Union itself, and that there's conflict at the border, there's armed skirmishes at Berwick-on-Tweed, as there is at the heavily fortified Irish border, because, of course, whilst Northern Ireland is still part of the United Kingdom in this scenario, there's a new border wall. And there's trouble. There's a resumption of the Troubles. All this could well happen. All this was a risk that people were aware of course, at the time we had the referendum, but obviously a lot of people thought that was a risk worth taking.
Yeah, just everything that's happened with America and Trump and Brexit and now the pandemic. I think it's a very believable future that you paint. I mean, fingers crossed, things might evolve a little better than that, but it's a believable scenario.
It is, sadly, yes. If the Scottish had a referendum now, I'm pretty sure they would vote to leave the United Kingdom.
Yes,
and they would then want to join the EU. That would happen if they get the opportunity. And if the British government doesn't give them the opportunity, they will fight for it. They might even have an illegal referendum, such as they had in Barcelona, and that would lead to a lot of trouble.
Let's talk about the future plays in the same series. What have we got to look forward to, without too many spoilers?
Yes, well, the third monologue, which will be filmed in just under 2 weeks' time, is called Marlowe's Ghost.
Marlowe.
And, yes, Christopher Marlowe, the playwright.
Right.
Yes, it's a slight pun on, of course, Marlowe's Ghost, but yeah. It's written, the monologue is presented from the point of view of an elderly, now retired William Shakespeare, who's given up writing plays and gone to live back in Stratford-upon-Avon. He retired, actually, in reality, at the age of 47, surprisingly, the height of his powers, just after writing The Tempest. And a lot of people wonder why. Shakespeare's plays are, there's a veil drawn over their authorship. As you know, a lot of people think, maybe Edward de Vere wrote them, maybe Francis Bacon or someone else, because the folio doesn't have his name on it. Or when it does appear, it's in inverted commas, all very mysterious. Well, this monologue seeks to explain both things, why he retired at the age of 47, at the height of his powers, and why he drew a veil over his authorship of the plays. And the reasons for that all lies many years before, about 23 years before the monologue itself is delivered, concerning Shakespeare's friendship with fellow playwright Christopher Marlowe and the events that led to Marlowe's assassination.
I think there's a theme in your plays. You're very interested in the past and sometimes sort of righting the wrongs of history being recorded badly. I remember Richard III, which was Good King Richard, and instead of the Shakespeare angle of this guy with a hump who's doing soliloquies to camera and winking and killing people off left, right and centre, we are given probably a far more realistic portrayal of the man himself.
Yeah, that was, again, based on a great deal of research that I tried to present what I thought was the real Richard III rather than the Shakespearean villain. I'm not at the moment planning a monologue based on that one.
But it was great as a play when I saw it.
Yes,
saw it a couple of times.
Enjoyed that. Yes, thank you, yes. And then the one after Marlowe's Ghost is called The Triumph of Evil. And, that's a very dark monologue. It looks at the Holocaust from the point of view of Count Bernadotte, a Swedish aristocrat who had to deal with the devil when he entered into negotiation with the leader of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, in an attempt to liberate thousands of prisoners from the concentration camps. So this is a true story. And Count Bernadotte is the character who tells the story, and it's interspersed with his own observations on what happened and why the German people did what they did, why the Nazi hierarchy did what they did, what lay behind it, what lay behind the motivation for the final solution. So it's very dark, it's quite philosophical. There's Iago, as it's called, which, as the name suggests, is a version of Shakespeare's Othello, that's seen from the point of view of the villain of the piece, Iago, It uses not exactly modern language, but it doesn't use Shakespeare's original language, a sort of stylized language. So it's the story of Othello seen from Iago's point of view, his attempt to gain revenge after being passed over for promotion. And I've tied it into the Black Lives Matter campaign. It's quite controversial in some ways.
Right.
Most of us accept that for too long, able-bodied white men have had an unfair advantage, but not everyone agrees with positive discrimination. And in this retelling of Othello, Iago most certainly doesn't, because he feels that he's been passed over for promotion in favour of Cassius, who in this version is also a man from BAME. So it's a modern-day presentation of the story of Othello from the point of view of Iago.
And perfectly timed as well.
Yeah, that's right. Then there's The Strange Romance, which is all about a young man who falls in love with someone who is of indeterminate gender, which is based on a previous play. And then there's another one called Transhuman, which is science fiction. It's explores transhumanism, the idea that we can transcend the boundaries of human experience, that we can plug ourselves into the World Wide Web, surf the internet with our minds alone, possibly even transcend our bodily mortality. Some scientists sincerely believe that we will be able to in a decade or two. So it explores that possibility. The monologue is being delivered by somebody who has been through that experience, who has become transhuman.
You mean in the story?
In the story.
Yeah,
yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I was going to say, really? Wow, that's cool.
Well, it's not that, the leading proponent of this sort of transhumanism is a scientist, a well-respected scientist called Ray Kurzweil, and he believes this will happen within his lifetime. And he's well into his 70s now, so I think he might be being a little optimistic there. But this monologue looks at what it will be like to become transhuman and the implications of that. Would you yearn for interaction with the physical world? There's all sorts of moral and ethical issues to be explored.
But also, you've got to, your mind has to be sort of not even reproduced. It's got to presumably be the same mind, but inside the net. Or are you just duplicating it?
Well, that's a very good question. And that this monologue addresses precisely that.
Ah, right.
I mean, at first glance, you think, oh no, this is just a copy of you. It's not really you. It's just a copy. There was an episode of Black Mirror once where a young man dies in a road accident, and his wife starts interacting with the digitized copy online, which was formulated from his Facebook experiences. But that was just a copy. That wasn't him. But transhumanism is not that. Transhumanism is something completely different. It is you. It is a continuation of the self. And the way that's achieved, or would be achieved, is by a gradual process of cybernetic augmentation. You will make the move gradually. It isn't a sudden thing. And this way you get used to surfing the internet and popping back into your corporeal form, and you can move backwards and forwards. And eventually, when the time comes, you can spend all your time in the digitized form. But it's a gradual process, and that's the key to maintaining the self, or the essence, the soul, or spirit, if you like.
Yes.
It's existing ultimately in a purely digital form.
Fascinating stuff.
It's going to be quite a challenge.
It sounds fascinating. They all, I think every single one of your plays, you've really gone in feet first and deep dived into issues and, as I said, writing history and exploring very complex themes.
Well, it's something you can do with a monologue. Sometimes in an ordinary play with realistic conversation, people don't often delve into these philosophical areas so much. But if somebody is sat there opening up their mind, reflecting quietly on the things that have been happening in their life, you have an opportunity to do that in a monologue in a way you can't actually do it in a stage play. But of course, the difficulty is to make it entertaining and not seem like a lecture. And that's the trick.
Well, based on the first two I've seen so far, I think it's going to be a fantastic series. I also must add the music is wonderful, an original score, I think, and the titles are sumptuous. I mean, it really sets the scene for a quality drama.
Yes, well, that's Howard himself is responsible for the titles. He's done a really good job with those. And Neil Thompson for the music, original music. I've worked with Neil before. We've together we've been working on a musical, and this is the play that the lockdown put a stop to, really.
Yeah, right.
But that will appear next year. So I wrote the lyrics, Neil wrote the music, And we've what I think will be a lot of very catchy songs. And so I asked Neil to produce the music for these monologues. And it's not all the same. For example, in Marlowe's Ghost, he's produced a sort of Baroque version of the theme.
Ah, right.
So sort of for mandolin and lute.
As a sort of full stop, where do we find these?
Yes, well, there are different ways of finding. If you go to YouTube and type in Golden Age Theatre Company, that will take you to the monologues.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could go to the theatre company website, which is www.goldenagetheatre.com. Of course, it's all free. I'm not. We don't have a sufficiently well-oiled YouTube channel to actually start profiting from this at the moment. In many ways, the monologues are a test bed for real live theatre performances. On the strength of the first two, the artistic director of the White Bear, Michael Kinsbury, would like to see them performed in the theatre, the White Bear in Kennington. So, assuming that theatres are able to open smoothly, as we hope in the next over the next few weeks, we're hoping to actually stage them for live sometime in late September or October. So that the film monologues are a test bed for the theatre monologues. It may be that once filmed and watched, we think, no, that just doesn't work. Or maybe it's too long, or it's too boring, or it's too preachy. Some of them won't work. It is experimental. But some, I think the first two will. The first two that we've actually got in the can will. They'll have to be tweaked for live performances. But as for whether they all will, at the moment there are, I think, seven written monologues and a couple more in gestation. 3 currently in rehearsal.
Okay.
A couple more which I haven't even asked, I haven't reached out to actors yet.
It sounds like you have your hands pretty full. Ian Dixon Potter, thank you so much for chatting to us today. I'm so looking forward to the monologues, and the very best of luck with it. Also, stay safe.
Yeah, okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ian Dixon Potter there. Well, that's it for this edition. If you want to email us about anything at all, the address is coronachroniclesshow@gmail.com. Well, we're taking a short summer break, but Corona Chronicles will be back very soon. So until then, this is Nick Randall saying take care and look after yourselves. Goodbye.